China's claim as the cradle of human trade is no exaggeration. According to the I Ching, Book of Changes in English, trade originated in the era of Shen Nong, approximately 5,000 to 6,000 years ago. The I Ching states, markets gathered at noon, join people and goods from all under heaven. They trade and depart, each obtaining what they need. This ancient wisdom reveals three layers of significance: material, systemic, and spiritual, each vital to human survival. First, the law of complementarity. Persian traders exchanged spices for Chinese silk, a natural choice shaped by climatic differences, that is, tropical crops versus temperate textiles. Second, risk dispersion. Song Dynasty's merchant ships on the maritime Silk Road carried 30% extra cargo to weather storms, akin to modern safety stock in supply chains. Third, the cultural hybridization. Buddhist art fused with Gandharan influences to create Dunhuang murals, prove that cultural trade transcends material exchange. China was the first that pioneered trade institutionalization nationwide by the central government authority. Over 2,300 years ago, the rights of Zhou established contractual ethics called 治纪 laws, mirroring WTO principles, then followed by the standardization of trade. The Qing dynasty's Sangyang function, which unified volume measurement in the 3rd century BCE, parallels modern ISO certification. With the guidance from the higher authority, the commercial society established the sacred contracts. A 1,270-year-old Tang Dynasty Sogdian contract from Dunhuang imposed 300% penalties for breach, an early form of letters of credit. There was also the anti-monopoly rules, traced back to the Han Dynasty's Book of Price Stabilization, published in the 2nd century BCE, curbed holding, foreshadowing the EU's Digital Markets Act, short form for DMA. Fast forward to the 15th century, the famous Zheng He's voyage exemplified China's trade philosophy. The time-tested Chinese tribute system traded porcelain and tea not for colonies, but for cultural affinity from 35 nations. Ming Dynasty naval supremacy, which accounted for 80% of global tonnage, spent only 3% of physical revenue on defense, comparing to Europe's 20 to 50% at the same time. Zheng He's fleet eradicated pirates, built lighthouses, and secured Indian Ocean trade routes, a model of providing global public goods. The modern echoes to these ancient practices is the Belt and Road Initiative, post-China Railway Express launch. Terror attacks drops 47% along its routes, validating the ancient axiom, a well-fed society understands etiquette. If trade becomes a zero-sum game, that would result, as history has shown us, in wars and colonization, resource plundered and monopoly control established. The logic behind this is, trade becomes a tool to seize resources, markets, and tech, aiming to crush rivals. In practice, there will be tariff barriers, tech embargoes, for example, chip sanctions, and forced decoupling. Result would be disastrous: broken global supply chain, inefficiency, and consumer suffering. When trade is militarized, all economic acts would be seen as national security threats. Consequences are shattered trust, fragmented tech standards, and stifled innovation. Further on, there will be broad confrontation. Exclusive blocks and coercive long-arm jurisdiction are unavoidable. Example, Cold War's Comecon versus Marshall Plan. The first victims will be the developing nations. They will lose policy autonomy. As the globalization recedes, regional conflicts rise. No one, including those first among equals, will suffer and lose control of their destiny. It also means almost no short-term gains and certainly long-term losses. Economic laws have proven to us defying principles like comparative advantage invites disaster, which will have macro impact, that is shrinking global trade with economic nationalism that leads to collective losses. Also the micro impact, initiators usually becomes the first dominoes to fall. Examples are plenty, and some of them not so ancient memory, such as EU farm subsidies distorted agricultural product prices globally, and the 1930s Smoot-Hawley tariff deepened the Great Depression. Furthermore, the sanctions put on Huawei today by the successive US governments led to chain reaction of global chip crisis, exposing the true face of political coercion over commerce, akin to rendering 12th century Genoese credit practices useless. Not only this did not achieve the purpose of slowing down China's AI industry advancement. On the contrary, it resulted in China's even faster-paced challenge to US AI dominance. Trade war or not? To answer this multi-trillion dollars to be or not to be question, to know the economist's role is key. Take Peter Navarro and Stephen Merwan, for example. The former, the co-economic advisor, an architect of Trump's tariff war. The latter, creator of the infamous and nonsensical 2024's Guide to Restructuring Global Trade, and the chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, short form for CEA. Both as Donald Trump's economic right-hand man, their theories, for better or worse, are rippling globally like a butterfly flapping its wings in the Amazon. To understand what the so-called economists in totality are made of, we have a shortcut. Let's study the case of Nobel Economics Prizes. Since its establishment in 1969, there has been 56 awards to 96 individuals, which reveals a pattern. No repeat winners. When comparing their award-winning data processing models, economic frameworks, policy ideologies, and academic theories, so on and so forth, many are diametrically opposed, if not outright polar opposites, detached from reality. More often than not, they contradict one another or crumble over time, which means none of them could withstand the test of time. Yet, time and again, it is precisely this group of people, though differing in life experiences, yet highly similar in academic training and scholarly backgrounds, who are repeatedly selected for awards. Upon closer examination, the underlying logic is quite straightforward. First, they are essentially mouthpieces nurtured by special interest groups. Second, these so-called economists, cultivated within a close academic ecosystem, are inevitably the product of intellectual inbreeding. Despite differences in gender, career paths, and personal experiences, their knowledge base and reasoning patterns are largely uniform, aligned with the interest of the shadow forces that provide them with educational and professional opportunities. Although their individual research directions, approaches, and methodologies may vary, a set of authoritative institutions upstream of their work, like control system of a dam, determine what kind and how much of an academic harvest they are allowed to reap downstream. Special interest groups then select from among them the research results that best serve their narrative or agenda, depending on the needs of the era and their own survival, and present these findings to the world as truth. Trade wars, in this case the tariff war, emerge from the same logic. The ruling elites cherry-pick theories to justify their plunder of the world. I am no wise man, neither am I a prophet, but I still want to draw a picture for everyone to see that can vaguely present a future of what's happening today will inevitably lead to. Instead of following the footsteps of those so-called economists I criticized above, because I myself is also a product of the same system, controlled by the world's ruling elite, I believe the preface of A Tale of the Two Cities by Charles Dickens would be a proper choice, for two reasons. First, he was ahead of our times, which means his mind was not polluted and corrupted by the present-day elite. Second, he was no economist, but rather a writer and a critic of the capitalist world. Here we go. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven. We were all going direct the other way. To understand the above words fully, you only have to know this was written on the eve of the French Revolution. Mind you, my friends, there is no romance in those words. Amid the churning currents of history, all chaotic forces are gradually sifted, some collapsing into disarray, others coalescing into stark binary oppositions. The old orders smeared in the dust of inertia, while the new broom of change prepares to sweep. Humanity's complexity ensures that good and evil, ideals and corruption perpetually coexist. Yet, no one escapes history's cyclical tides, much like the Bourbon dynasty's most famous cry at its pivotal hour. The king is dead. Long live the king.